Joan, you want to do the intro? You want me to? However you want to do it.
I'll start.
Okay.
So first of all, it's nice to see many of you who I know and others of you who I don't know. And hopefully this will be a useful time to get some questions answered. We typically, normally we would have the Board of Bar Examiners Chair, Rick Freychuk, kind of leading this off, but unfortunately his wife had had surgery today, and so he's with her instead of with all of us, which is of course we're exactly where he should be. But we're very lucky to have the Board of Bar Examiners Administrator and also member of the Board of Bar Examiners, Dean Gould, here to be able to provide expert answers. I am not only a professor at the law school, I'm also a member of the Board of Bar Examiners and have been since 2020 through several administrations now. And it's great also to be able to welcome Professor Katie Beckman, who's here now, as we know, at Boyd, as the new assistant director of the ASP program, working with Professor Lissy. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know, what do you think is best? Do you want to, what works best? I don't really have any speech or introduction prepared. Maybe, did you have anything, Dean, that you wanted to say at the outset, perhaps in response to some themes?
Well, yeah, just a few things, Joan. Thank you. As Joan said, I'm Dean Gould. Dean is my first name. I'm not a dean. Although when I was teaching, a lot of students thought I was a dean, so that helped. I wear two hats here. I am on the Board of Bar Examiners and have been since 2016. And I am also the admissions director. I was the admissions director several years ago, left. And then when the person who replaced me left in October, they asked me to return, so I'm there. This will be my second bar administration back as the admissions director, but I did several before, so it's not new to me, although there are changes. And I guess the first thing I want to say, aside from welcome, is that, you know, the staff and I try very hard to be responsive. Hopefully many of you have already met, you know, if not, well, you would have spoken to maybe or emailed with Cindy Fulton, who is the sort of the gatekeeper on all things application wise. And she's very responsive. And when she doesn't know an answer, she will come to me. I just want to quickly tell you who the other staff is in case you hear from them, and then we can get into the exam, and I'll let you guys, if you want to ask questions or whatever. Anitra Jones is the admissions manager, and what Anitra does is she reviews every file for character and fitness initially. She's like the investigator. And every file goes through a character and fitness review. She writes them up, and then I look at every file, and I make the initial decision whether a candidate is cleared, whether they go into an interview with me, or they go into a hearing with the character and fitness panel, but we can talk about that later or another day. And then Dean Fernandez is the assistant director, and he handles a lot of things that it has a huge amount of knowledge, but his primary function is, other than being the assistant, is he handles most of the data issues and the mechanics of the bar exam itself. Sort of the two of us do that. So with that introduction, I think I'm just going to open it up, Sydney, if that's okay, and let people ask questions, and then I think information will just come out.
And we could also go through some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time.
I'm happy to do that if you want. Yeah.
The first one was whether there were any are there restrictions on what can be brought for the open book bar exam? Are essay templates and flashcards allowed? Is there any limit to what we can bring for reference during the exam? Could you explain what notes the bar examinees can bring?
Absolutely. That's a good question. I will tell you at the outset two things. Everyone who's taking the July bar will receive about mid-June in an email called a document called a notice to appear. And this is your formal notice that you have been authorized to come and sit for the exam. It has a lot of information in it. I strongly encourage you to read it carefully. It will answer most, if not all, the questions that are probably going to be answered today. I did just recently as yesterday, just because I've been working on this, I've updated most of the website. I did hear this morning there's another section that I missed. The problem is that there's too many sections, frankly, and I'm trying to make it a little more streamlined. But all the frequently asked questions, there's a section called FAQs. Those have all been updated. And a lot of the questions that or information from today will be on there. So if you either don't remember or something wasn't asked, look on there first, because I think that'll give you a lot of this information. And secondly, when you get your notice to appear, most of this. So the bottom line is you can bring in written materials. If you choose to bring in essay templates and flashcards, as long as it's written, or hard copy and it's not electronic. When we decided as the Board of Bar Examiners to go open book, it's open book. We're not going to look and see what you have because our questions are designed that it's good if you need reference, but if you don't know the material, you're not going to learn it there. So we're not going to be picky. You cannot bring in, someone asked about book stands and things like that. No secondary apparatus because we don't have room. We have over 340 people right now, maybe 350. Very few of them are in Reno. Most of them are here in Vegas. And so we have to be very cautious about room space. Also, no electronic devices, and other than your laptop. So no iPads, no cell phones, no watches, anything, there's no internet connectivity. Your questions will show up on your laptop because you will have, of course, every one of you will, if you haven't done it already, will immediately go and register with ILG on the website. They sent you an email on the 1st. That has to be done by July 15th or you won't be able to use your computer. It cuts off then. But one of the things that program does, and it's probably similar to what you've used in law school, for those of you, is it will cut off any ability to get to any part of your computer other than the questions that are downloaded. So I hope that is going to answer the question. If you have specific questions, you can ask them now. Again, and Joan may want to weigh in, but our goal is not to limit you, but also we have to be conscious that, we have a lot of people in that room and you just can't bring in, tons of material that will just be unwieldy, but we're not going to measure it. We're not going to say you can bring in 3 books or 4 books. Okay.
So one of the questions, Dean, was about how much space is there. And I would just say before I invite you again to answer that, the questions about book stands and how much space, I think, are really important, valuable to answer, not because it should be a serious concern of yours, but because if you're thinking about needing to bring a lot, you're not thinking correctly about how to do well on this exam. So you aren't going to have time to go through your library of relevant materials. You won't. You need to be using your time to think about what the problem is. Use your notes, some distilled notes, to be able to get quickly to the parts you might not remember without the notes, right? So if you have a negligence question and you've always had trouble understanding how to organize the proximate cause element of negligence, well, then maybe you have in your page or 2, right, of your own distilled outline down to the basics kind of checklist or the whatever format you're using to be able to move through to make sure you remember what you want to talk about. So maybe you have some rules for how to approach proximate clause if there's a proximate clause issue. It won't help you to go flipping through Barbary to find proximate clause. That's too much time. It's too much. It's just not worth it. I can imagine if it were me, I might want as a sort of a security blanket to bring in, I don't know, a couple of additional things beyond what I really would have time for. But really what you need to have, what will be most valuable to you is your own outlines, your own flow charts, the ways that you have distilled the information and the rules down into a very small number of pages. You should have only at most two or three pages, I think, for each subject area that you know you're going to be tested on. Related to that, that's because the work of preparing those distilled notes is the work of getting your brain to understand how to organize. And the time of how to organize your response needs to be engaged with the facts on the new questions that you're getting on the bar exam, not with thinking about how to organize, right? So you will have already thought how to organize. You already have your flow chart. You already have your outlines that works for you. That isn't just copying the pages or printing out pages from Barbary. It's your distillation that works for you. That's what you need. And that won't take a lot of space. And you definitely won't take a book stand. And you need to plan to not need to look at anything other than those notes that you have, that you'll have well organized and tabbed or whatever helps you in the way you're doing it. Related to that, I just happened yesterday afternoon to be having a conversation with a friend who will remain nameless, who's on the faculty at Boyd. And my friend was talking about the difference between the take-home exams more recently and the not take-home exams. And one of her, that narrows it down to 60% of the faculty, one of her frustrations was that with take-home exams and open book exams, students were overusing templates. So now I'm responding to the part, can you bring in templates, right? Like here's the template for how you approach a question. And the answer is there's no prohibition on bringing in templates. And the caution coming directly from my friend's mouth, this is what, this is maybe pathetic, but this is what law professors talk about when they're just having friendly conversations. It was that people at Boyd, students at Boyd were overly relying on pre-planned templates and not doing enough thinking about what was needed. And that they weren't customizing to the questions that were being asked enough. So that by cutting and pasting or by just repeating some language you already have, to the extent that you're by rote, just inserting something that you have already written in some other context, be very careful about that because you can stop thinking and be too formulaic. And you have to make sure that any template that you have created actually is a good fit for what the issues are that you need to be talking about. And the temptation is to be talking about what you've pre-written as opposed to what you're being asked.
I think that's great, Joan. That's really great advice. One of the things that we look at on the board when we write and grade these questions, obviously, is heavily weighted toward analysis. And I would say, and Joan, hopefully you would agree with this. If not, you feel free. But going to an open book concept, which we all felt was fine because we don't practice law usually in a closed book setting, other than maybe in a courtroom, is that we sort of expect that you're going to know the nuts and bolts. And so what we're looking for, obviously, is some regurgitation of nuts and bolts, but primarily the analysis, which is, I think, what Joan was getting at. And the analysis, in order to really get that, you have to have the ability, number one, you have to know the substantive law. you can't be learning it at that moment. And secondly, you have to have some time within a really short relative time period to think about the facts and how they apply, the law applies. So that's why we came to the decision as a board that we weren't going to require bar applicants any longer to come in with, thousands and thousands of concepts memorized, although essentially in a level, you need to have them pretty much, not if not memorized, you have to know them so that you're not, in my day, we had mnemonics. And I remember the first thing I did when I sat down at the table was write, like the mnemonic, or if I saw it was a question, let's say of adverse possession, I would write the mnemonic for adverse possession because I wanted to make sure I got it, but I had to first recognize it was adverse possession, which I wouldn't have known if I hadn't studied it. And I just wrote the mnemonic down as a security blanket. So I would make sure I got those points. So it's the same thing here. Yes, we expect you to give us black letter law, so to speak, to start. But without the analysis, you will not do well. So that's why you really have to focus on thinking and having some time to think and outline your answer, even if it's a minimal outline. Just organize your thoughts. Okay. In terms of the physical layout, I doubt we're going to be able to have one person at a table like we used to do. Well, no, we didn't used to do. When it was at UNLV, we had two people to the table on opposite sides, opposite ends. During COVID, the times that I think there was only one time they had a live exam, we did one table per person, but we had fewer people, I think. With this number of people, I don't see it. We're going to be at the Suncoast toward the end of June to sort of start the physical planning. And we're going to see if we have enough room for the computers. The handwriters, I don't think will be a problem because we don't have very many. But people who are taking it on a computer who are in their own room, separate and apart from the handwriters, they will probably have two to a table. So keep that in mind too. You're probably not the only person at the table, but there's quite a bit of distance between you and the person across and on the other side. Okay.
So let me go through, before we call on Nina or anyone else, let me keep going through some of these submitted questions. When will the schedule for the 2 days of the exam be released? That's in the
notice to appear, and that you'll get mid-June. I can essentially tell you, because it's not a secret, it's not, when we do a 2-day exam like this, so you're all very lucky, because one of the biggest things that people didn't like, and I remember when I took it many years ago, I didn't like it, but I did it, was we no longer have the 2.5 day when we're not using the MBE. So essentially you're going to have, I think it's about maybe 6 essays of the 7 on Tuesday. And you will have the 7th essay and the 2 NPTs, the 2 practice tests on Wednesday. The essays, and I know someone asked this, so I'm going to I think it's on this list, Joan, so I'm just going to go to it if that's okay. We give you, on Tuesday for sure, we give you blocks of time. So we don't say, okay, here's question 1, you have an hour. Here's question 2, you have an hour. We'll give you like 3 questions in the 3 hours, and you allocate your time however you want to allocate it. I would just warn you to watch the clock, because you don't want to spend 2 hours on the first question and then only have an hour for the other 2. That will hurt you. So you have to time yourself within that time frame. Obviously on Wednesday, when we have essay 7, that's an hour, and then we'll break. Then we're going to do each NPT, which are 2 hours each. And we'd give there's a 15-minute break between the question 7 and NPT 1. Then there'll be lunch, and then there'll be NPT 2. So it's really Tuesday where you have to really watch on that, okay? Because the time is not, we just let you do it. Someone else asked, and I'll answer this. After a lot of discussion, we did decide that we are going to hand out written questions to everyone, including computer takers. Although your questions will be embedded into your laptop through the ILG program, and we give you the password for the session at the beginning of the session. So you can't get into them ahead of time. So session 1, which would be the first 3 questions, will give you that password at that moment. We will also hand out paper copies because people apparently like that. You can write on them, you can do whatever you want, but we will collect them before you leave the room. So just like you won't have any further access into your ILG program question, you won't be able to take those questions out of the room. And we will provide scratch paper, and we will collect the scratch paper that you've used. But again, this is a little different than we used to do because now that it's open book, you know, it's sort of an honor system because, I mean, I guess you could put the scratch paper in your outline and we wouldn't know. We're not worried about it. But in the days when it was not open book, we didn't let anything in and we didn't let anything out. So a lot of this is just, again, I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot. So that's why we ultimately decided to allow the proctors to pass out hard copies of the questions. Plus, the handwriters get hard copies, obviously, because they don't have computers. So we thought that's only fair that everybody's on the same playing field on that.
So what about the copy paste function, Dean?
Okay, ILG will have a copy paste function, but it will not have spell check. And the reason for that is that the handwriters don't have spell check. Now, they don't have copy paste either, but that's more organizational. That's not substantive. That's just a function of using a computer. But we felt it wasn't fair to the handwriters if you had access to spell check and they don't. And I can tell you, and again, Joan may want to weigh in on this, having graded many, many, many exams, both in law school and in bar exam, while it's not great, I don't take off points. I mean, it's not like I look at a misspelled word and say, oh, this person's terrible. You know, we understand the stress you're under. We understand what's going on. So this isn't like an English paper. Obviously, it's good to have appropriate spelling and grammar. I don't want to dissuade you, but you know, it's not something to quote Joan, it's not something you really should be worrying about.
Right, I completely agree that it is true that bad handwriting can hurt someone.
Yes.
And so I would I wouldn't handwrite this test if I had any choice. And if I was handwriting, I would be practicing my handwriting because when it's illegible, it won't count for anything. And people are human who are grading it, and it's frustrating and annoying to be struggling to understand something. On the issue of typing and typos, a few typos here and there are absolutely nothing to worry about. On the other hand, if you're so fast and so out of control that it's garbled, that it's really, really hard to figure out what it is you're saying, that's not going to help you either, right? So you want to have it be, don't worry about having it be perfect. But on the other hand, you cannot just slam and type anything and have it actually work. It has to be, I have to be able to understand what you're writing, or any other bar examiner has to be able to understand. So then some more general questions we'll do, and then get to your questions. Are all of the essays Nevada law? Do you want to take that one, Dean?
Yeah, and I know why this can be a little confusing because it talks about Nevada essays, but it's always been referred to as Nevada essays. There is no difference on this exam between the topics or what we're looking for, just because it's an open book exam. So will there be some Nevada? Well, clearly the NPTs are Nevada, but you're given that library. And Joan is much more knowledgeable about that than me. So I'll let her address those. But on the general essays, we're not going to be looking for it because this is not a gotcha exam. We're not looking to hurt you and we're not looking to trick you. I would study for this no differently than any other bar exam that's ever been given. And I know that may not help you if this is your first one, but the call of the question will identify what we're looking for. So one example might be constitutional law. It may say to you under the federal and Nevada constitutional law, how would you answer this? So I can't say to you, no federal law would apply. But on the other hand, and again, I'm separating out the practice test and I'll let Joan address that. We're not looking for you to know that NRS 208.757 says this, because that isn't what you ostensibly learned in law school. Boyd is a national law school and you're taught national principles. Hopefully, if you are taking a bar review course, and hopefully you are taking one that at least provides you with a Nevada supplement of Nevada law, but that is more so that you understand where the substance of Nevada law differs in some way from some of the more national principles. Whether it's community property or real estate, where Nevada has some different positions than the national position. Hopefully your bar review course is going to cover those so you know them. But again, look at the call of the question. We take a lot of time on these questions and we are trying to be very thorough about what we're looking for. But I wouldn't approach this that it's a different exam in any way than what you would have studied for the July 2021 exam that was closed book and live. Joan, do you want to talk about the NPTs and anything else that I may have mentioned?
No, I agree with everything that you just said. And I'll just say about the Nevada practice tests that they are typically drawn on real cases and real statutes and real constitutional provisions. They could be federal law or Nevada law. If the federal law applies, they're all set in Nevada. And the issue of the sort of national law or law, general principles of law versus Nevada, I understand is frustrating to people, but I also am, my experience from being on the bar examiners is that the bar examiners are looking for an understanding of the basic principles and the ability to apply the new facts to those basic principles. And so if for example, there was something that was very weird in Nevada that was different in Nevada than in most states. If you do a good job of applying the general rule, you're going to get credit for that. And because you're getting credit for applying the facts to a sensible version, a typical version of the rules. So I don't think it's good to be too distracted by worrying about differences. If you have a sound understanding of how to apply the basic rules, that's gonna work for you. The other questions, I think this is a really good question because I've had the same question. How are the sample model answers posted on the State Bar of Nevada's website selected? And I would just say my impression is that the administrators, there have been various administrators who've been selecting them over the years, and they've had different ideas of what they were doing. And so there's some examples there that are that have mistakes in them, and there are other examples that are, I think, samples that are better. I can say that for me as a bar examiner, when I am selecting the when I'm now given the opportunity to select the answers that I want to be up there, I'm looking for answers that aren't going to be misleading in any way. And therefore, I don't want any big mistakes. On the other hand, I think it would be good to have multiple examples for each multiple answers to show that there are different ways to answer and still do well. It should make you feel good that even when I'm only given as possibilities answers that got 10 out of 10, I still have to comb through them to find that don't have anything extraneous that could be misleading. In other words, you can still get 10 points for doing a solid job, right? Hitting all these essays, even if you have some weird thing at the end that was not right, you're not going to lose points for that necessarily. So in other words, you can do very well without having to be perfect. The next question I'll get to, which I can take, why do only 60% pass? And I guess I would say there's a fluctuation in pass rates. The pass rate is based on the efforts of the bar examiners to be determining minimum competence to practice law. That minimum competence means competence without supervision, practicing law. And the efforts of the bar examiners are very much to there's no pre-existing set percentage. There's no pre-existing assumption about how many are going to pass or how many are going to fail. For many of us, it's disappointing every time we read an exam that is not showing minimum competence. And I can tell you, every time I open up a new exam, I want it to be really good. And I have that mindset, and I'm ready to see it, give it some benefit of the doubt along the way. But sometimes it is revealed in the answers that the person answered a question that wasn't asked, or stopped thinking, right? Or moved into doing something that they felt comfortable with that wasn't really what was responsive, or was so chaotic in what they wrote that I have no idea what they're talking about. So in those cases, those people have not demonstrated minimum competence. And the whole purpose of this is to protect the public. Because once you get licensed, you're in for life. Right? It's like a federal judge. And that's a big deal. And practicing law is difficult, and therefore the license should mean something. So my hope is that as we get better and better, as students understand more and more what it takes, what you have to bring to this process, that we can get higher and higher pass rates. But it's not going to be because what is understood to be minimum competence has shifted. It will be because of more students having been able to bring the best version of themselves to the preparation. Then the last question we have.
Excuse me, can I add to that a little bit?
Sure.
Number one, I think it's really important to stress something that Joan said, and that is that we do not in any way come into an exam with any preconceived percentage of passing. We would love to pass as many as we can pass. The exams go through multiple readings, and particularly when we don't use the MBE, every exam is initially graded by at least 2 people. Each examiner has 2 graders with the examiner. So those exams are divided so that every exam gets graded by 2 people. If there is a disagreement, so to speak, the bar examiner who wrote the question and the answer will make the final decision. We then go through a regrade process a few weeks before the test results are released. This is very time-consuming, but very important, because there are tests. And first of all, let me say, we don't know who you are. These exams are totally double-coded. So you're given an applicant number, and you're also given afterwards It's all scrambled, and we have no idea who these people are. There's no way that anyone could know. So we sit down in a room, and after the grading is scaled by our psychometrician, anyone who's within a certain defined range, which is set by the Supreme Court, we read those exams again. So some of these exams are getting 3 and 4 readings. And while our goal is not to just pass people, our goal is to give people another chance that sometimes, a fresh pair of eyes, or if it's been a couple weeks and we look at it again in our room when we're all sitting together and everyone's looking at their own questions, we have very, very good discussions, and it's very thoughtful. And it is not, like I said, it is not intended to try and limit people or keep them out. I'd say it's just the contrary, keeping in mind, as Joan said, that our goal is to make sure we're letting people into the bar who demonstrate minimal competency to practice. It's not a law school exam. We're not looking for you don't have to have an A, but you have to show that you have minimal competency. Okay, so I think that's really important. And one other thing I just want to clarify, Joan, if I may, is I pointed out, and I think it's important, that while it is important when you're answering questions to talk about general principles, you should have in your bar review course some kind of a Nevada supplement. I know Barbary has it. I don't know about the other ones. You need to know those, because if you are asked a question and Nevada has sort of a different approach and you don't mention it, I'm not sure you'll get a 7, which is the lower, that's the passing grade. Because if you went out in the world and didn't see that, that would be malpractice. So you have to focus on that. But it isn't a lot. Nevada doesn't have a lot of those differentiations, but that's why the Nevada supplements are important. So you need to study those. And one of the other questions I see here, and maybe you were getting it to, June, and I'll let you address it first, was whether they take their time memorizing or just dive into practice for studying. I'm going to let you take that, and then I'm happy to add to it if you want me to.
So I think the main, you have to, there's no one size fits all to answer the question about whether one would spend a lot of time memorizing or just dive into studying. And dive into doing practice essays and practice questions. I would do lots and lots of practice essays and practice MBE questions, even though there's no MBE on the test, because the MBE is the best way to figure out whether you understand a whole lot of doctrinal areas. So you should be taking MBE questions, and you should be making, every time you give yourself an essay question to write, or you give yourself MBE questions to answer, you should be keeping track of where you make mistakes, what you know and what you don't know. And so you use those to then, as the questioner said, through trial and error, but it's really you're building up a more and more self-awareness about what your own strengths and weaknesses are. So the more you understand the areas of law that you don't get right, the more you can concentrate on those. As human beings, we have a tendency to want to concentrate on where we're more comfortable, where we feel safer and more secure. But in this whole studying for the bar exam, you need to do the opposite. And that is, even though you love, constitutional law, when you really are good at something, you can concentrate on the things you really hate and where you're not as good. Keep going towards where you're weak, and doing the multiple choice questions and the essays will help you to do that. And that's a way to learn to memorize, in a sense, learn to become really familiar with the rules. We had a question from Victoria on the chat to me, which was, if we're taking the exam on our laptops, will we be allowed to exit the exam program so we can access files on our laptops, for example, PDFs of outlines? No. And the answer to that 2015 is,
No.
Right.
Here's what I'm going to say. First of all, you may enter and exit the room to use the restroom, but all of your extraneous devices and everything else, if you bring them into the building at all, which I'm not sure you would or should, we will have a room where you can store those items. It's locked, however. We don't guarantee the safety of it, so it's not like we can't guarantee you that it won't get stolen, but we try that it won't. We often will have a proctor sitting there, but we don't let you in that room during the exam. So no, I'd say the bottom line is no, you cannot come in and out for that purpose.
but coming in and out of the program on the computer too. When we say you have open notes, that's hard copies, physical pieces of paper that you bring in, not stuff that you've loaded onto your computer.
No, you won't have access to anything on your computer. You can't.
Right, you can't go in and out of the ILG program on your computer.
Correct.
So your computer is only going to be good for one thing, and that is running ILG during.
Which I don't think is too different from what you've experienced at Boyd. I mean, I don't know anymore, but when I taught a few courses there, you know, they had the company would be there, but I don't think you could go out of the room and look at resources and come back in, or even go out of your computer and go. I think they're designed to block you, so you can't do that. Is that not true?
Right. That's exactly, yeah. That's what I understand is true. And then I have another question in the chat, and then and then Nina Garcia, and then Larry Sampson. But first, the question from the chat is about what about scaling without the MBE? And what I would say is that I'm not sure that the right word would be scaling. The word is calibration, really, for what we're doing. We're going to have, instead of normally when the MBE is used for scaling, which is a technical aspect of the grading, which shouldn't really matter to test takers exactly, but when we're not using the MBE for scaling, instead of having only one grader read every single answer, we're going to have two. And so the assignment of the grader is to grade on the basis of minimum competence, and above minimum competence and below minimum competence. And the calibration comes from training the graders to be able to understand exactly what the rubrics are for each question, what the scoring is rather for each question. So, Nina, and do I have the ability? Okay, great.
Oh, thank you so much. I guess this is more of a more personal question in terms of how I'm practicing right now, but I'm hoping some of my peers can relate. I was under the impression that we would still be allowed to bring in like a separate keyboard for those of us that use an ergonomic keyboard or a mouse. Is that not true? Based on
the bring in a separate keyboard and a separate mouse, and I have to look and see what it says. That's a good question, because we may not have carved that out, but I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
But that would be it.
That's
so if it doesn't say that, then I'm going to thank you for raising it. I will, because I know in the past, we've allowed people to do that. The only thing we will probably do is just look at it, you know, to make sure that it's appropriate. But again, we're less concerned than we used to be, because with the closed book exam, you know, we were concerned that someone could hide notes and things in there. We're not as worried about that anymore. So yes, keyboards, I'm going to make a note of that, Nina. Thank you for raising that.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that the notice says that. Keyboards and mouses, yeah, external. No separate monitors. People
right.
ask about that. No separate monitors.
Right. I would understand why. And that doesn't count as like a request for an accommodation, because everyone would be, okay, perfect. Thank you.
No. An accommodation is a totally different process. And if any of you have asked for those, I can just quickly tell you what that is, but that deadline's already passed. So if you haven't asked for it, but we have a whole panel who looks at every one of those. They're doing that now because we just got past the June 1 deadline. That's for people who may need extra time. They might need a scribe. They might have a physical incapacity, something like that. And all of those are reviewed separately. And anyone getting an accommodation is in a different space. They're not going to be in the space that the main computer room or the main handwriting room.
Larry Sampson.
Thank you. Just kind of going kind of back, and I don't mean to jump back a little bit, but as far as the grading is concerned, presumably there's some sort of rubric, at least if not, laid out in the mind of whatever grader of what they're looking for each particular set of facts. And to what degree is there an expectation to address the red herring facts, like something within the essay that is meant to throw you off, but relatively speaking, as it pertains to the relevant law in that particular question, has no bearing, is not dispositive whatsoever. So let's say it's a mailbox rule that doesn't have to do with the acceptance, like they just mention a mailbox to see if it throws somebody off. To what extent do the graders expect you to say, well, it appears as if this particular fact is trying to test this particular concept, but it does not apply here?
So the answer is discuss what applies. So I have not seen bar examiners trying to set up people to have to talk about things that if there's any factual basis to make a legal argument then you should discuss that legal argument. But the point of the reason that's really an important question, Larry, is that the point of the analysis of these questions is to test legal judgment. And legal judgment is about recognizing what's a sound issue versus what's not an issue, right? So in a way, it's hard to give any really concrete, useful advice about that, because the only way to know what to talk about is to know how closely the facts have in fact raised a serious legal issue that should be discussed. So if it's something that is clearly not, if there's something that seems to you to be calling out to be discussed because it seems like a lawyer should be talking about it, then you should talk about it, even if it's not a good claim, I guess is how I would say it. But if it's an arguable claim, you want to discuss it, even if it has some weaknesses in it. But you don't want to just talk about something that because you happen to know about it, if it's not an arguable claim raised by the facts. I don't know if I feel like that's probably not all that helpful to you, because essentially what I'm saying is just knowing the difference between what's important to talk about and what is not important to talk about is exactly the skill of legal judgment and legal analysis that's being tested.
Thank you.
So to put it a different way, it doesn't help you to just essentially I don't want to use the word vomit, but to regurgitate everything you've ever learned or memorized about something, because that doesn't give us the sense that you really understand the problem. You may understand black letter law, you may know it, but that's not, remember, we keep saying it's analysis, analysis, analysis. I also want to thank, I see that Victoria and Justin have quoted from the site, so I did put that up there. So about the keyboard and the external mouse, yes, you may bring them in. It says that, and it just says they may be inspected. We do try to look at those things. If I may, I'd like to just add a couple quick things related to that. We do have an ILG technician or technicians in the room. So if something happens, and it often does, during the exam, there's a process, and what they used to do was raise their hand, and the ILG technician will come over and help you. Okay, if you freeze, if you get locked out, we have people in the room to help you. Okay, The other thing I'd just like to say, and again, this is all in there, but I get asked this a lot. If you finish early in a session, in an exam session, if it's within 15 minutes of the end time, you have to stay in the room. We don't let people out then. And I'll tell you why. If it's because it's distracting to people to have a lot of people moving out, and if you were still typing and thinking and writing, you wouldn't want all this activity around you. But 15 minutes, beyond 15 minutes, yes, you may leave, but what you need to do is you need to have an ILG technician come. They confirm that your computer has been turned off, so that you're out of the program, and then you may leave. They give you like a pass, and you just give it to the door proctor, and you can leave. But within that 15 minutes, you just can sit there and meditate or whatever you want to do, and as long as it's quiet, and then you'll get dismissed with everyone else, where everyone will be asked to turn off their computers and get out of the program, and the ILG technicians will go around, make sure, and then when we get the all clear, then we will dismiss everyone from that session. So hopefully that will help you with that.
The one of the ways that people end up not passing a bar exam question is if they spend a lot of time giving a little kind of introductory treatise about what they know about contracts or whatever it is, the First Amendment or torts or something. And as a grader, I don't even read that. Right? I get a little anxious when I am skimming over it, because I'm getting to the part where they're going to start the actual dealing with the question. And I'm getting more anxious because I know that every moment that they have spent repeating from a template or doing, giving this big introduction, this little treatise of what they understand, is a moment they don't have to do the analysis. And these tests are time pressured. And so you want to make sure you're not wasting any time that way. Gabriella, thanks for being patient.
Of course. I have a very technical question. So I did the ILG download and trial exam yesterday, and you have to log on to Wi-Fi. You have to exit the program, turn your Wi-Fi back on to upload the exam. So do we do that on exam day, or was that just how the trial one worked?
I think that's just how the trial went. I don't think they're going to have you do that. Now, I can't say that for sure because I haven't been through one with ILG. When I was there before, we had, I think it was ExamSoft. But I think everything is embedded. What I've been told is everything is embedded, so that you just turn it on. But if they do ask you to do that, which I don't think they will, again, they will be there. But once you're actually in the program, then you don't ever leave it.
Right. That's how it was during the trial exam. You couldn't leave it till the session.
And if anybody downloaded the first 2 days, maybe, you may have gotten a second email from ILG asking you to do it again. And the reason for that is because they didn't take, the spell checker was left on. And when I saw that there was spell check, I asked them to remove it. And so for those of you and they know who you are because they keep track, they're going to send you an email and ask you to go back, download it again, because you'll want the version without it. And they'll know. So if you don't do it, they'll know. And I'm not saying anyone wouldn't do it, but there were only 20 people who had already done it. So if you are one of those 20 and you did get that email yesterday from ILG, just go back in and download it again. And again, that date is July 15th, and that's a hard date. So if you don't do it by July 15th and tell your friends and anyone else taking it, then we get confirmation from ILG and they will not allow you to use the computer. So do yourself a favor and do it quickly. The other thing I want to point out, which is technical, is you have to upload your answers by, I think it's 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday of the exam week. You can upload anywhere where there's internet. So whether you're able to do it from the room is unclear to me, because sometimes there's too many people and you might be better off just going home and doing it. And you don't have to do it after every session. You don't have to even do it Tuesday. But I would strongly encourage you to do Tuesdays on Tuesday and Wednesday on Wednesdays, because as with everything else, you get people who wait, and then there's a problem when you can't get up and upload. We haven't had a problem with that ever, but there are jurisdictions in the past where there were problems uploading because everyone was trying to do it at the same time. So do yourself a favor, and at the end of every day, at least both days, upload your answers to ILG. Once you upload them, then you've done what you need to do. But if you don't upload them, then when we go into the program on the following day, we don't see anything. And then you have a problem. Okay, so just please do that. It doesn't take very long, and it's important.
So a word or two on the Nevada Nevada performance tests. You need to have practiced taking performance tests. You need to have ahead of time. Again, there's time pressure in all of these things. And that means by the time you're in the exam, you don't want to waste time wondering what your method is. You want to know what your method is. You want to know exactly how you're going to attack and approach this, and what will work for you best to efficiently find out what the task is, what the legal issues are, and what are the crucial facts in the file. One of the frustrations that we have had with the Nevada performance tests that we've been using since 2020 is that there are some good students, good future lawyers, potentially, who are not used to reading statutes, apparently. So if you happen to get a statute as part of the library, or multiple statutes as part of the library, even though a lot of your law school education has been reading cases, you actually have to read the statute. And part of what's been frustrating to those of us grading them is that there are too many candidates are leaving points, easy points on the table by not actually carefully reading a statute. So I forget now which one it was, which exam it was, but there was one in particular where people cut and pasted the section of the statute that had the crucial answer in one of the sentences. An answer to a relevant answer where they could have gotten points easily. Nothing complicated, just noted whatever it was. It was right in the statute that the thing that was proposed would not be legal under the statute because of the timing that was required under the statute. Nothing complicated. A large number of people never actually read what they had pasted in and therefore didn't include that answer. Okay, so the goal here is to have a method that will bring your best brain to the work of the critical reading of the entire statute. You can read other parts of problems in the library. You can read parts of cases in a little different way. By now, you should be good at figuring out how to get to the meat of the case, right? And not worry too much about the parts that are clearly irrelevant. But if you've got statutes in your library, you need to read them word for word. And that's what good lawyering is. That's what minimally competent lawyering is. Are there other questions? I don't see any hands. Is there anything Professor Lissy, is there anything that wasn't covered or that you think we should address additionally?
No, I think you covered the usual information.
We didn't, since Rick Treytrock wasn't here, we didn't get to hear him say what he says every time: be brief, be brilliant, be gone. And I think what he means by that is what I was trying to say: don't give a whole big introduction, right? And don't deal with anxiety by trying to just tell everything you know about something that may not be related. Focus in on what the key analysis is and do a good job on that.
And there's one thing I'd like to add, and I'd like to echo what Joan had said earlier, Professor Howarth. I'm not sure how they refer to you, Dean Howarth. I don't know what they call you. I call her Joan. You know, even though the MBE is not on the exam, and even though you don't have the stress of worrying about doing 1.7 seconds per question, the process of reading MBE questions through your bar review course and the answers is critical to sort of refreshing and learning the substantive law. I learned more from the questions that I initially got wrong when I was doing that process, and I'd look at the answer and I go, oh, now I get it. Because you tend to look at those a little more closely than the ones you get right away, because you might have gotten it right for the wrong reason and you don't even know. So you should always look at the answers and look at those questions. And again, not from a performance perspective like people used to have to do, but from a substantive legal learning perspective, because it's a great resource for just learning black letter law. That's really what it is. And I would encourage you to do it, because I've had some people question, they've written to me and said, well, do we even have to worry about the MBE? Well, not in a test perspective, but I think substantively it would be really helpful for you.
Yeah, there's no more efficient way to get some feedback for yourself about what you learn, what you understand and what you don't understand, than lots and lots and lots of MBE questions. The other thing that I think Rick Treytrock often says, and I completely agree with it, so I'll throw it in here too. For an hour essay answer, you need to spend at least 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes outlining what you're going to say. That's where sometimes we get answers that are frustratingly poor, is when someone does not have a clear organization and they start saying something and then they go somewhere else and then they come back here somewhere else, and it's just, you can just have a sense of someone being lost. And that same person, if they had stopped to figure out what do they know about this, what are the issues, and stop to do that thinking, reading the question multiple times to make sure you haven't missed any crucial facts while you're writing your outline, then that outline frees you, right, to be able to then just follow that plan that you have created. And so don't just jump into writing. I can tell when people do that. And even when you're short on time, which you hopefully won't be too much, but if you screw up your time management, you end up having the third of a 3 and you're worried that you don't have time, still give yourself 5 minutes at least. Better to give yourself enough time to do a 10-minute outline for a 1-hour question. Because you know you've worked hard, right? The whole point of this is for you to bring your best self. And bringing your best self it's not just about learning the law, although that's part of it. At this point, that's a really crucial, good part of it. And it's not just learning how to do essays well and how to time the different kinds of 1-hour essays and how to time the 2-hour NPTs. It's also having being able to know that when you walk into that test, you're facing a big challenge and you're going to bring your full best self to it, and that you have done the work to be able to do it. And that confidence comes from taking it seriously, putting in the time, having a plan, following the plan, leaning into your weaknesses so that you can address your weaknesses. And by the time the end of July comes, you are ready to do it. And in some sense, even eager to do it, maybe just eager to get it over with, but ready, feeling. And all of you you've all accomplished difficult things in your life, and remembering how you did that, and remembering why you came to law school, why you put up with law school during a very challenging, difficult time, why you stayed in law school, why you succeeded in law school. Remembering all that is part of bringing your best to this test, because we really are, we're eager to welcome you as members of the profession.
Okay.
Anything else, Professor Lucy?
No, does anyone have any final questions before I let the examiners go?
Best of luck to everybody. I'll probably see you, if you're taking it in Vegas, I will see you in July. Oh, one other thing I just wanted to mention, if I may. We're having this time a voluntary registration period. And I say voluntary because we used to require everyone to come on the Monday of bar exam week and register. So that when they came in on Tuesday, all they had to do was check in. But people were complaining that, especially people that were not living here, had to come in for an extra day. So what we're doing is you may, if you choose, come in on Monday afternoon, starting at 1 o'clock to the Suncoast and register. If you either don't want to do that or can't do it, you can still come in starting at 7:30 in the morning on the 26th, which is Tuesday, and register. You're not required to come in on Monday, but it's strongly encouraged if you can, because number one, I think it provides a level of psychological assistance for you to have done that, and you'll be able to go into the room and see where you're going to be seated. And I know that I always felt better when I could picture that in my head, like maybe the night before, so it doesn't seem so foreign. But again, it's not required, but you do have to then come in. Everyone has to be registered and in their seats by 8:45 in the morning. And this is all in the notice to appear, and it's all information that you will be provided. But I just figured, since I had this opportunity, I wanted to let people know, because I know you're starting to worry about the logistics. You should be worrying. I wouldn't worry too much about the logistics. We're there to make this hopefully as positive an experience as it can be for you. Again, we're not out to hurt you, but you have to understand the rules, and you have to follow the rules. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Cindy Fulton, or you can reach out to me, email me, and I'm happy to, if I answer you. But right now, just focus on studying. That's what you should be focused on, and not worrying about a lot of the technical details. You'll get that information. We've done this for years. We know what we're doing, and hopefully that part of the experience will not be difficult for you. Okay?
And ILG has a much better track record than ExamSoft in terms of you should have confidence in this program. Most of there have been a lot of very well-known problems with bar exams, and they're definitely associated with the other leading company, not the one that we're using. We're using the one that has the best track record on purpose.
Yeah, and they are excellent. They are. As someone who deals with them a lot, I will tell you they are excellent. So that, again, we are there to help you. We're not there to hurt you. And your job now is to study and get ready and get your head in the right place so you can go into the exam and give it your best.
One and done. So good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye.